Right, let us crack on with another one. So we were in Inverness yesterday. So we need to go south about 20 minutes. I think it's about 16 miles. So let's call it 20-minute drive south to here, which is where the Tomatin distillery is. Now, I've always pronounced it Tomatin. I could be wrong, it could be Tomatin, but I'm pretty certain it's Tomatin. You can call it Tomatin if you want. You say Tomatin, I say Tomatin. That's that's the way the story goes anyway. So this was a donation, miniature in a tin of the 12-year-old from Mr. X. Very kindly donated. Oh, comes with a little prize as well. It's a free gift. In fact, there's 2 free gifts in this little package. We have a bottle, and we also have 2 packing peanuts as well. Thanks, Mr. X. I shall keep them. See if I can do anything with them. Maybe sell them on auction or something. Maybe? I don't know. Anybody want to buy any packing peanuts? I've got 2. Right, so this is Tomatin, 12-year-old. Now, this was a distillery. It still is a distillery. I think I need to stop. I've only had one. Distillery founded in 1897 by, I don't know. Doing the research on this, and I've looked at Malt Madness, which somebody recommended. I've looked at the Whisky Exchange. I've looked at Master of Malt. I've looked in a couple of other places. I've looked on Wikipedia. We can't trust Wikipedia, but I've looked in a fair few places, and not one of them says who or what founded the distillery, or who took it over in 1909 when the first owners went bankrupt. So they didn't do a particularly good job. What they do talk about is in 1986, it was taken over by why am I doing 2 different? It was taken over by 2 Japanese companies called Takara Shuzo and Okara. And Takara Shuzo actually bought out Okara in 1998, so they still own it. It's a Japanese company that own this, but it's not like a Suntory or anybody like that. Although they are still a pretty big Japanese drinks company. So they bought the distillery in 1986 when the previous owners again went bankrupt. You can kind of sense a pattern emerging with a lot of these distilleries. You take a distillery over, you go bankrupt. Somebody takes it over, they go bankrupt. Apart from Diageo and Brown-Forman and all these companies that have got the scale to be able to not go bankrupt. So Takura took it over in 1986, but between 1956 and 1974, there was a massive period of expansion. So in 1956, 58, sorry, even quicker than that. 1958, they had 2 stills. By 1974, they had 23 of the bastards. So that's a fair old expansion. And by the early to mid 80s, they were basically one of, if not the biggest producing single malt distilleries in Scotland, not just the Highlands, in Scotland completely. Now in the 80s there was then a bit of a slump and it basically scaled back. So of the 23 stills that they had, 11 were removed. They were doing at their height about 24 million litres worth of whiskey. At the moment they're doing about, I think, well, last I'd read was about 5 million, but I think it might even be less than that because that was 5 million about 5 years ago. So it could be a little bit less than that. Now, from what I gather, 80%, if not 80%, a hell of a large chunk of Tomatin goes into particularly Antiquary, which looks like this. I'll put a picture of it up. I have actually got the miniature of that, so I'll have that at some point. And also a blend called Talisman, which I've never come across. The only Talisman I've ever come across is the really good Stephen King book. Stephen King, Peter Straub. If you haven't read The Talisman, it's well worth getting. I digress for a change. So this Tomatin, now it was previously a Tomatin 10-year-old that changed to a 12-year-old in 2003. In 2010, they then changed it again into, it was explicitly stated as in a sherry matured version, which looked like this. And you're looking at about 30 to 35 quid for that one. So that is now their standard bottling. But I'm going to take this because, as far as I'm concerned, this is the standard bottling as well. Apparently, the new version is supposed to be slightly better, but this still gets some pretty good reviews, so I'm taking it. So thank you to Mr. X for this particular one. Now this is a bit of an odd one personally, because this is one that my dad had a bottle of when I was a kid. but I can't find it on his shelves anymore. And it was one of those where, for some reason, the packaging just made it look older than it actually was. But it's not a great bit of packaging, particularly that older one. The new one's not too bad actually, but this packaging and this label just kind of looks a little bit cheap. Really, it's just personally, it was one of those where I always saw it on the shelf and what, that doesn't look like a particularly good whiskey. And then you kind of get this feeling of, well, it probably tastes a bit rough and it probably doesn't taste that good. I know I've had Tomatin before when I was working at the whiskey shop. I can't for the life of me remember what it tastes like, so it's almost like I'm going in blind, to be perfectly honest. There's a good deep colour to it. Whether it's got colouring added to it or not, I don't know. It's entirely likely, because it is quite a rich classic whiskey colour. There's quite a honeyed sweetness on the nose. There's a slight sparkle to it as well. Now it is 40%. I'm going to double check. Yes, it's 40%. Standard 40%. There's a definite honey note to it as well, which is quite pleasant. A little bit of oakiness, predominantly honey with a little bit of oakiness to it, but there's kind of like a sparkle to it. There is a freshness to it as well. It doesn't quite follow through on the palate. The honeyness is there, and then the oakiness just overrides everything a little bit too much. Which suggests to me, from what I've been reading about the new sherry version, is that more of that comes through, and it's almost like what is sherry oakiness has now gone the other way. And if that's the case, then I'm willing to bet that that's really, really good, because personally speaking, on this, I'd much rather have more honeyed sweetness and less oakiness. It's just balanced, just too dry for me, just too woody. It's a little bit what I imagined as a kid looking at the labelling of the Tomatin it would taste like. It's just a little bit rough around the edges. It's just not quite balanced enough, a little bit too harsh, almost like a graininess on it. It's almost like a blend that's got the edginess of the grain whiskey in there. It's just a little too unbalanced the wrong way for me. A bit too dry. Yeah, it's just a little bit too dry, a little bit too oaky, because the sweetness and the honeyed maltiness that's there to start with is really, really nice, but you just kind of get halfway and then it goes out of the way. You're going to have some wood. Starts off so well, starts off really, really nice, and then just goes dry, needs some liquid, needs some water, I'm chewing on a twig type thing. So, if the new version of Tomatin, the new Tomatin 12-year-old, has redressed that balance, it should be a cracker, and for about 30 quid I think it's probably a really, really good price. So try and find it, try and find a tasting bottle, miniature, something like that, and give it a go, because if they've overcome the faults that are in there, that will be an absolute cracker. That, however, unfortunately, little bit of a letdown, but it's another one down, and we shall carry on making our way south of Inverness. I need to look at the map and find out what we've got next, so I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.